The AFC North has not been the tight race that we expected it to be. And while the Ravens are playing up to expectations with a lead in the AFC North, every other team in this division has completely disappointed. The Browns are fighting to be 500 in November, and for a team that was expected to win the division pretty easily, that is definitely a disappointment. The Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of a weird situation because the goalpost gets moved with them a lot. They lost Big Ben, so we thought they would go anywhere from 6-10 to 8-8, and then they won a few games in a row, and people are talking about 9-7, 10-6 with 2 Defensive Player of the Year candidates. But things seem to be trending down for that team. The Bengals did not have high expectations to begin with this season, but if I would have asked any of you in August, and if you would have asked me in August how many wins the Bengals would finish the season with, I would think anything less than 3 would be ridiculous. And now 3 wins would be a major turnaround for a team that has no win. So since the division is not really close, and it's not really worth arguing which team is the best in the division because that's a pretty clear argument right now. Instead of doing that, let's actually break down each team and see where it went right, wrong, and where things could change for every team in the AFC North. Now we're going to look at teams through these 3 key questions. Where did the season go right? Where did the season go wrong? And where could things change for this team? So let's start with, now where did things go wrong? Well, the Ravens started the season 2-0 against the Dolphins and the Cardinals, and Lamar Jackson showed his potential to the world in those 2 games, but there was a question on whether the Ravens could continue to do that against better competition. And then better competition came. They played the Kansas City Chiefs and they lost, and some of those holes in their defense were exposed, but it was in week 4 in a home blowout loss to the Cleveland Browns where all of those weaknesses were exposed to the max. And I think for John Harbaugh, losing to Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City is one thing, but dropping a division game at home to a Cleveland team that was up and down at that point left a bit more of an impression on this team and on the fans and on the coaching staffs, and major changes were made. And those changes turned out to be very effective for the defense. The Browns put up big numbers against the Baltimore Ravens, both on the ground and through the air. Baker Mayfield had 1 touchdown, 1 interception, over 300 yards, and the Browns rushed for almost 200, but had 4 touchdowns on the ground. And the Ravens made some trades. They made some signings. They did a lot of things, and they really turned around this defense and eventually replaced 5 of those 11 starters who started in that game against the Browns, which leads us into where did the season go right for the Baltimore Ravens? Well, after having close and at times frustrating outings against the Bengals and the Steelers, this team traded for Marcus Peters, and then they beat the Seahawks. And this team, since that win, has been rolling on another level, beating teams like the Patriots, the Texans, and the Los Angeles Rams by massive, absolutely massive margins on the road, at home. It almost seems to not matter. Now, since this is one of the hottest teams in the NFL, it's only natural to ask, where could things change for this team? Now, peaking too early in the season is a real thing in the NFL. Dominant regular season teams struggle. The ideal of a dominant regular season team struggling with a wild card team is not a new concept in the NFL. And that is what I think can come ahead for the Ravens, because right now they're playing as good as football as a football team can play right now. There is not much better, or there is not much higher a football team can play at as far as a level goes. I don't think that is a thing that is possible. I think the Ravens are playing absolutely the best football that they could possibly play. And I think some of the best football that a team can possibly play right now. The problem with that is that right now, it is almost impossible to see any cracks, any weaknesses on this team. But regardless of what team you are, every team in NFL in history has cracks. And when this team starts to slow down, when this team starts to play at a normal, very good level, then those cracks will reappear. Now, admittedly, there's not a lot to go with here as far as the cracks go, but the one thing I will say is that if you look at when this offense has performed at its best and when this offense has not performed at its best, it's when they are down multiple scores. Now, that is a problem that on a smaller scale they can and have overcome. They've come back from 7 and 10 points, but 14 points is a different proposition. And that's what happened against the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns went up by a couple of scores, which forced the Ravens to kind of switch up how they play, which made them play a little bit sloppier, a little bit less crisp, and they didn't execute as well. And there were games against the Steelers where the Steelers were able to keep it close and get a little bit of a lead on them, and it really affected how they could play. And they didn't have their best offensive days. Now, if you look at when they've really been rolling, they've been able to get out to a hot start, jump out ahead, and maul these teams. And that is when this team is at its best. Eventually, there's going to come to a game where they can't get things going early. They're going to fall behind, and they're going to not be able to rely as heavily on the dynamicness of that run game to bring them back into the football game. So that is going to be an interesting thing to watch as the weeks go on. Can this Ravens team overcome multiple score deficits? Because if anything, if league history tells you anything, is that you're going to have to overcome multiple point deficits in order to win a Super Bowl. And at this point, that is the game for the Baltimore Ravens. Also, another thing that could be an issue for the Baltimore Ravens is that athletic defensive lines seem to have been an issue for this offense. If you look at the two teams that have had some kind of success slowing down and frustrating Lamar Jackson a little bit, it's been the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Cleveland Browns obviously had Myles Garrett, Larry Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson, and Olivier Vernon on their defensive line at the time. Very athletic on that line, very long on that line, so they were able to do a lot of things and counteract a lot of the play fakes because they had really good defensive line play in that game. Same thing goes with the Steelers. Cam Hayward, Bud Dupree, TJ Watt, all guys that are very good at finding the ball and very athletic to get to the ball. And that seemed to have posed a problem. And it'd be interesting to see what the Ravens do against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, where did the season go wrong for the Pittsburgh Steelers? The Pittsburgh Steelers have demonstrated that they did not have a great plan or a great solution to make up for not having Ben Roethlisberger. And for some teams, it's not really an indictment on the front office, because if you have a young quarterback, you're not going to have a great backup. That's normally how that thing works. But for a team that had one of the older starting quarterbacks in NFL, not having a sound plan at backup quarterback is kind of an indictment on the front office. There's really no excuse that the Steelers seem to have absolutely no solution for replacing Big Ben for a season. And that is not good, especially for a team that's quarterback has threatened to retire for like 3 straight years. The fact that Mason Rudolph was the best they got, it's not great. Now, Mason Rudolph has had his moments, to be fair, but he has shown in recent weeks that his floor can dip to disastrous places. Now, this guy, Delvin Hodges, seems like a decent enough option as a backup quarterback. He plays more competently. He does not throw the ball in risky areas like Mason Rudolph does. He does not turn the ball over as much as Mason Rudolph does. But let's be honest about Duck. Duck is not the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Duck is hopefully, if you're a Steelers fan, the future backup to somebody who is much better for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And with the team having as good of a defense as they do, it's going to keep the Pittsburgh Steelers from being just a flat awful team. And honestly, what that does is it makes me wonder, when are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to be in a position to draft another franchise quarterback? Now, they could get lucky and just get a franchise quarterback in like a middle rounds, but as a Browns fan, that route is not a great route. It seems like the Pittsburgh Steelers are, in all honesty, on a first class, all expense paid trip to QB hell. And that is not a place that you want to be. Mason Rudolph is the guy they invested in, traded a first-round pick because they were sold that he was going to be worth that. Now, Minkah has been worth that first-round pick, but when you put that against the idea of you could have probably got yourself a franchise quarterback with a middle first-round pick this year, then that's going to be something you're going to want to reevaluate. I know Minkah's been great, but a good free safety, a great free safety, an amazing free safety is not worth an average starting quarterback. That is just the reality with those positions. So Minkah Fitzpatrick could be Ed Reed 2.0, but if they miss out on somebody who turns out to be, maybe a top 15 quarterback in the future, then that was a terrible trade because that is worth more than 3 Minkah Fitzpatricks. If you don't have a franchise quarterback, you're not going to go anywhere. And right now, the Steelers have no plan for franchise quarterback. And I don't even know if Big Ben returns next year. And that is not a good place to be in. Now, where did the season go right for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Well, they added Minkah Fitzpatrick. And that was exactly what the Steelers defense this year needed, which was a good player at the safety position. TJ Watt and Bud Dupree have been one of the best NFL pass rushing duos. The Steelers had decent corners, but they didn't have a lot of long speed at corner. I said this at the beginning of the season, is that the Steelers could get beat over top because they don't have a lot of long speed at the cornerback positions. That is why adding a dude like Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is a very good safety, was a great addition for this team, because with those corners, they're very good until they can get beat over the top, and adding a Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of washes out their negatives and allows your pass rushers and TJ Watt and Bud Dupree to get to the quarterback more often, because the quarterbacks have to hold the ball longer because people aren't going to be open. And Devin Bush has come into his own. He's looked like a good. Where could things change for this team? Well, the uncertainty at the quarterback position has had an effect on the season, obviously. And while Duck has frankly played better, the organization has invested a ton more in Mason Rudolph. This is somebody who the front office said they had a first-round grade on. And if they think he's a first-round talent, they can't give up on him 10 games into his career. And for a team that has decent at best playoff odds and doesn't have a first-round pick, putting in Mason Rudolph doesn't make a lot of sense, because winning games this season is probably the only thing that matters, because if you lose games, you're not going to have your pick anyway. So it makes sense to put in Duck. But there's a clear ceiling on Duck. And maybe the front office should figure out if Mason Rudolph is worth bringing back next year, and see if they can invest a mid to late round pick in somebody for next year, just in case Big Ben does not come back. This quarterback position is a huge question mark for the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. And for their organization, it can be the difference from continuing to be at the top of the AFC North, battling for playoff contention, or being a team that is consistently 7-9 or 8-8. Because without a franchise quarterback in today's NFL, you won't get far. And again, this is somebody from Cleveland telling you, Pittsburgh, you don't want to end up in QB hell. Because once you're in QB hell, you don't leave QB hell. So where did the season go wrong for the Cincinnati Bengals? Okay, look, I really don't want to pile on the Bengals here, because I know how much this season has had to suck for their fans. I also feel bad for Bengals fans, because I'm convinced that the ownership is not ever going to be able to put the financial commitment down to putting this franchise on an equal footing with all of the other teams in the NFL. Instead of making an elaborate argument or a loud rant, I'm just going to show you a picture of all the AFC North team facilities. You have the Baltimore Ravens, who have by far one of the nicest practice facilities I've ever seen. They call this place a castle, looks like a castle. It's amazing. You should visit one day. It's really, really nice facility. They give you a lot of free stuff there too. Then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers facility, which looks great. They share it with the University of Pitt, whatever. Then you have the Browns facility, one of the top facilities in the NFL as well. Very nice. Has all this high-tech crap inside, indoor, outdoor fields. All of these teams have indoor, outdoor practice fields. Rain, sleet, shine, whatever. It's not even a big deal. They just got to go 3 steps over to the indoor facility. And here is the Cincinnati Bengals training facility. Yes, it is a patch of grass underneath the highway. They are not on the same level as any other team. The franchise has not committed to putting a good team in Cincinnati. The ownership has not committed to putting a good team in Cincinnati. So Bengals fans, I understand your frustration. I even understand your apathy at this point, because it's one thing to have a team that sucks, but to have a team that sucks and you have no hope of ever bringing in anybody because you know your franchise isn't going to put the money down to do it. You have no hope of being able to upgrade your facilities because there's no trust in this ownership, and this ownership wouldn't put the proper money down in the team to begin with. When your franchise is ran like that, it's really a miserable place to be as an NFL fan. So I hope every Bengals fan is having a great year for their fantasy football team, because just give you something. I know what 0-16 or 1-15 feels like as a fan. I wish that on nobody. So I don't want to pile on the Bengals. And I can't really sit here and rip any of the players or the coaches because they just weren't given a fair shot by the ownership. The coaching staff, okay? The one thing that Marvin Lewis was really good at, and the reason I think Marvin Lewis stayed there for as long as he did, is because Marvin Lewis knew through years of practice how to circumvent a lot of the deficiencies of the franchise in order to get his team ready so they don't seem like an embarrassment. And that took 20 plus years for Marvin Lewis to get to that level. That is almost an impossible ask for a first-year head coach, especially a first-year head coach who was a quarterback coach last season with the LA Rams. He was also given a veteran-heavy roster that was loyal to Marvin Lewis, which makes winning the locker room even harder. If you think it's a coincidence that after a few games, AJ Green's injury went from 4 to 8 to 12 to probably the whole season, it's not. It's because AJ Green probably doesn't buy into the coach's locker room. It's because the Bengals franchise didn't do what they should have done, which is trade away Andy Dalton, which is trade away Geno Atkins, which is trade away AJ Green, and give your coach a chance to have a locker room that will buy into his message. But you can't have a locker room buy in to the coach's message when the veterans are loyal to the guy that you're replacing. It flat just doesn't work like that. That's why the Miami Dolphins have 2 wins. It's because they realized that they got rid of all the veterans or all the people who didn't want to be there and play for the Dolphins and play for Brian Flores. They got rid of them, gave Brian Flores people who wanted to play for him, and gave Brian Flores an opportunity to not be a league-wide embarrassment. And that is a great thing that the Dolphins organization did. The Bengals ignored all of that. And now they got guys like Geno Atkins. Now they got guys like Andy Dalton. Now they got guys like AJ Green. All guys who are probably going to walk away from this franchise sooner. They're not even going to get a 4th-round compensatory pick from, because they did not understand that they were giving their head coach a terrible card, and that the situation that they put their players and coaches in is substandard for an NFL team. So I'm not upset. I'm not going to rip the Bengals players or coaches, because they are what they are, because the ownership stinks in Cincinnati, and I feel for them, because there's really no hope to change that in Cincinnati, because if the Browns sell the team, the chances that that team stays in Cincinnati are minimal. So honestly, Bengals fans, I hope Mike Brown just wakes up one day and has a change of heart, because I don't want to see the Bengals leave Cincinnati. And I want to see the Bengals not be this. I don't wish this on anybody, because I've lived through that, and that is miserable. So Bengals fan, hopefully it gets better. Hopefully things get better. Hopefully somebody decides to invest in your market and your team. But right now, you don't have an ownership group that's interested in doing either. And I really do feel bad for that. The Browns. Where did it go wrong with the Browns? Okay, so after the Browns beat the Baltimore Ravens, they had confidence, they had momentum, they felt good, they got a big road win. And at the time, the 49ers were undefeated, but we did not know that the 49ers were real. And the 49ers introduced themselves against the Browns on Monday Night Football and beat all of the confidence, all of the momentum, everything from the Browns. They beat it down. I called 911 while watching the game because it was that bad. It was a beat down. It was brutal. It was just bad. And it was so bad that it spurred the Browns on a losing streak that took them an entire month to get out of. Now, where did it go right for the Browns? Okay, it starts with one name, Baker Mayfield. He has turned the ball over less. He's thrown more touchdowns. He's been more efficient. He's been more accurate. He's been better. And when he's better, the offense is better. Nick Chubb gets better rush lanes. Jarvis Landry gets more yards and touchdowns. Odell Beckham gets more open. It's amazing what a good quarterback and good quarterback play can do for an offense. He's been sacked less. He's been playing better. That has been the difference. The defense has been playing the same way. They've been a decent defense all year. That hasn't changed. Baker Mayfield playing better football has been the change. And that has been the difference for the Browns since the bye week. Where can things change? Against Pittsburgh is going to be a huge test for this Browns team because this is going to be the first time they play a decent opponent in a big-time situation, okay? Thursday Night Football at home has an advantage for the Cleveland Browns. It was a game they should win, and they have an historical advantage to win. But beating Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh Sunday at 1 o'clock, there's no historical disadvantage. It's more lopsided in the other direction. So the Browns winning in Pittsburgh means more than just getting to 6-6. It means more than jumping their spot in the wild card race. It means that things are changing, that this is not the same old Browns, that they are capable of doing things that they are capable of doing, which may sound archaic if you're not a Browns fan, but if you watch this 2-6 start, you understand what I'm saying by that. A win against Pittsburgh shows that you can play well in your division, you can play well on the road, and that you can do something that this franchise has not done, I don't think ever since coming back since 99, which is sweep the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you should sweep the Pittsburgh Steelers because Big Ben's not out there. Antonio Brown's not out there. Le'Veon Bell's not out there. You know, the guys that they have out there aren't those dudes. Those are the dudes who have dominated the Browns for years. Duck or Mason Rudolph, whoever it is, Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner are not the names that have been dominating this team for decades. This is a new chance to write new history. This is a chance for Baker Mayfield to show that he's really good in the division and that he is gonna do things that other quarterbacks could not do in this uniform. And if they do it, I think the momentum will carry them possibly to a playoff berth. And if they don't, then they're probably gonna stumble to about 8-8, and we're gonna really have a question about the head coaching situation. But either way, this is a moment. This is a fork in the road. This is where the Browns can decide to be different and make that change and be a better franchise, or do the same crap they've been doing for the last 20 years. But that is the state of the AFC North. 3 teams that have disappointed their expectations, no matter how big or small, and 1 team that has blown the doors off of expectations, and that word doesn't even exist in Baltimore because they just destroyed it. So that is the state of the AFC North. What do you think the state of the AFC North is? Do you think there is room for the Steelers to grow? Do you think they're going to avoid quarterback hell? Do you think that the Bengals can find a better situation, hopefully from an organizational standpoint? Do you think that the Cleveland Browns are going to finally make the turn, beat Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, and decide that they aren't going to be the same old Browns that they decided to be at the beginning of the season? Let me know your answers down in the comment section down below. That is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and have a great day. And have a good night.